and go live on Facebook, and then we'll be ready to roll. Hang on a sec. Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to make Mark the host. So he has all the control, everyone. He can do anything he likes. And over to you, Mark.
And thanks, Cassandra.
Well, thank you, Cassandra, and have a great flight and enjoy yourself, yeah?
I will. I'll think all good thoughts about you all. Okay, bye.
Bye. Well, we are delighted today to feature four of the most active and most talented prose poets in town. They are Meg Pokrass, Dave Swann, Celia Bland, and Jeff Friedman. We're delighted to have you here today. But before we commence with our feature, we'll hear from our co-host, Jeffrey Cyphers Wright. Jeff received his MFA after studying with Allen Ginsberg. He's best known as a new romantic poet. He's also a publisher, critic, eco-activist, impresario, filmmaker, puppeteer, and artist. Jeff is the author of 19 books of verse, including Blue Lyre and Party Everywhere. His poems have appeared in the Cafe Review, New American Writing, the Brooklyn Rail, the Hurricane Review, Posit. His recent work appears in the anthologies Best American Poetry, New York Insiders, and Contemporary Surrealist and Magical Realist Poetry. Jeff's latest work, a book of sonnets and artwork called Doppelgangster, just came out from Mad Hat Press fairly recently. And Jeff also recently won the Sir Vision James Tate Prize, so expect to see that book soon as well. And Jeff also publishes Live Mag.
Well, thank you, Mark. Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to be here. Such a great network and family here. So I'm going to read this little poem I wrote. I just thought it's just a sonnet, so I thought I'd just mention a couple of things. It's called the Merkin Motets. And these are two words I didn't know what either one of them meant. So a motet is a sort of a choral for voices musical piece. So I thought of each of these little couplets as a motet in itself. And it's called the Merkin Motets, or Good to the Last Straw. And I noticed a lot of times for me, when I'm struggling to try to come up with an idea or write a poem or do anything like that, that a lot of times the description becomes the first line, and then I'm off, So I'm always looking for that. So here it is. Okay. The Merkin Motets, or Good to the Last Straw. Like an old hotel with plywood on the doors and mothy curtains over black-eyed windows. Like the difference between wage and wager, we have a little spat over the cost of time. Like the last survivor of the spinners who died at the age of 95 in North Carolina today. Like listening to Lament for Beowulf, its long suddenness replenishing its past. Like having a shadow that itches, like a horn of fog on a Sunday without sun. Like being good to the last straw, you appear to me, a mix between a lifeboat and a flood. Silly love, you party with extremity, drunk on being here. I keep writing the same poem. As I'm sure, thank you very much. Cindy encouraged me to read that. I got to give her a plug there. So also that line about the horn of fog, I was going like, nobody's going to get that. But I put it in there because it's like, they used to drink out of horns. And I thought, well, hell, Beowulf's in there. So enough of that. All right. Beowulf. Speaking of Beowulf, Mark Vincennes is our modern Beowulf. He's an Anglo-Swiss American poet, a fiction writer, translator, editor, publisher, designer, multi-genre artist, and musician. He has published over 40 books of poetry, translations, and fiction, including more recently, The Pearl Diver of Iramani, White Pine Press, A Splash of Cave Paint from Spuyten Duyvil, a chapbook An Alphabet of Last Rites from Servina Barba. The King of Prussia is Drunk on Stars from Lavender Ink. The Mayfly Codex, Spite and Dival. Three Telltale Love Signs, Subpress Collective, and recently The Visitation, a novelette from Sir Vision. Mark is also a prolific translator and has translated from the German, Romanian, and French. He's published 11 books of translations, most recently An Audible Blue, Selected Poems, 1963 to 2016, by award-winning Swiss poet and novelist Klaus Mertz, which won the 2023 Massachusetts Book Prize for Translated Literature. His own work has been translated into many languages, including Japanese, Chinese, Russian, French, Italian, Romanian, Greek, German, and Icelandic. He's currently working on a novel entitled The Age of Occasions. Vincenz is editor and publisher of Mad Hat Press, thank you, Mark, and publisher of New American Writing. He's lived all over the world, from Brazil to China to Iceland to India. He was born in Matilda Hospital on the Peak in Hong Kong, but now he lives on a farm in rural western Massachusetts overlooking Herman Melville's Greylock Mountain, Melville's inspiration for Moby Dick, where there are still some long-tailed weasels, boreal woodland caribou, and black-tailed jackrabbits. Oh, there's more of these than there are bipedal hominids. Please welcome our host, Mark Vincenz.
Thank you, Jeff. This is a poem which is just recently written in my new book that I'm working on called Megalopolis, about the birth of a city. And it's called The Iron Plier Society. 1. Dutiful to the last decree, such was the last pilgrim upon their final pilgrimage. Forged by a local blacksmith, the iron pliers had been made to extract the iron nails from a substance harder than iron, the same substance that had been harvested for eons by the makers of racks and of guillotines, of L-shaped tongued and grooved contraptions that wielded nooses or barbed chains, or for those who silently carried the axe in shadows. The Iron Plier Society was selective, and price of entry was prohibitive. Yet somehow, young Frederick Fleisen made the pinch, and pinched he was with a caustic branding poker, and he joked he was now in the elite herd among the queens of cows, and after having been milked out, would settle on any old pasture as long as there were daisies and buttercups and wild strawberries. 2. Grandmaster Fleisen, in his last great year serving the Iron Plier Society, decided that from henceforth every household in the land would receive their own pair of pliers, an instrument from the Iron Plier Society to look down at you from your plaster walls, to accompany you on your way to work, to serve you as a guardian of a practical self. For only as a practical self can the self be fulfilled. So saith the founding blacksmith from the forge of the great creator, in candlelight, poring over his meticulous journals and copious notes. For a moment, estranged he was, far from himself, and in that last thunderstruck second, he awoke, unsure who or what he was, until gradually he was molten into a better version of himself, and like an old milking cow, galloped among the old pastures where buttercups and sunflowers, where wild strawberries and elderberries were all aplenty. And then finally, as the teeth ground down to a nub and the taste buds shed their skins, the eyes too began to tear uncontrollably. It was then he cast his bones upon sacred ground for all and anyone to eat. Such was the all-practical self, he said, self-practicing the less practical self. Thank you. And now I'm delighted to introduce the first of our readers tonight, Meg Pokrass, who's coming to us from, I believe, Inverness in Scotland. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
And so how far away is Loch Ness?
5 miles.
Already, do you go there frequently?
I do go there frequently. I am in search of Nessie.
And any luck?
Not yet, but I have found a few monster hunters.
Hmm. Well, we'll definitely have to look out for a book of yours called Monster Hunters or something like that.
I have a book called Kissing the Monster Hunter. I'm slightly obsessed with monster hunters. I'm more
Right.
obsessed with monster hunters than with the monster.
Gotcha. Well, anyway, let me do your bio quickly and let everyone know what you're up to.
Okay.
Meg is the author of 9 flash fiction collections, including The First Law of Holes, New and Selected Stories, forthcoming with Zank Books in October 2024, and Breath and Shadow, 6-sentence stories, co-authored with Robert Scottolaro, forthcoming with Mad Hat Press in April. Meg's stories and poems have appeared in publications such as the New England Review, Electric Literature, Waxwing, Passages North, Smokelong Quarterly, The Wigleaf, Top 50, McSweeney's, 5 Points, Plume, Washington Square Review, and many anthologies, including the Best Small Fictions anthology series, the Norton Anthology Readers, including Flash Fiction International, and also Flash Fiction America from 2022. Meg lives in Inverness, Scotland, very close to Nessie. And she's also founding and managing co-editor of the Best Microfiction. Welcome, Meg.
Thank you so much, Mark, and thanks so much for having me here. I'm actually going to be reading some longer pieces tonight. I find it's easier to read longer pieces when I'm doing a slightly longer reading. So they're mostly flash fiction pieces from recent publications in literary magazines. And I'll start with a story called The Producer. The Producer. The 90-year-old producer had a hole in his heart, a shaky, unpatchable hole. He wanted me to fill it with kisses, candy, and jokes. I handed him a travel-sized Mars bar that I got on the plane. Only a monkey, he said, would offer this old sack of bones a gift from the red planet. He said this because of my newly red hair. He liked to run his skinny fingers through it. I called him the producer because he had always wanted to produce a movie. Sometimes he asked me to write one, told me to create a character role just for him, and to make him younger, less shaky, without Parkinson's, less married. That was easy, as I imagined him a younger person. The nickname Monkey rubbed off on me. There was a gullible monkey on my shoulder, enjoying the stories he told me about his terrible home life, how his wife carried a loaded pistol around the house, even in her PJs. She never puts it away anymore, he winked. What a horrible person she was, I told myself, kissing his shivery lips. That blouse is very flattering on you, the producer said, his face half fallen. It was the same blouse I had worn every other night in the dining room. I wondered if he had had a mini stroke in his sleep. Half of his face looked younger than the other half, less perceptive. He gazed at me as if I alone provided gravity. The hotels we stayed in had very good food. We would eat in the dining rooms, and middle-aged businessmen would stare with disgusted expressions as the two of us nibbled appetizers and sipped rhubarb gin. They thought he had to be a great uncle or a grandfather, so why was I wearing such a low-cut, decadent blouse? Why were his eyes gripping the rise of my cleavage as if he was pulling himself out of some brackish lake? He's a producer, and I'm in love with him, I wanted to say. Give me a break. I didn't have a dad, I wanted to scream. They would offer me a weak nod as if to say, well, if he croaks tonight, I'm around. My story is filled with love tragedies, and I told the producer all about them. You should write a screenplay about all of them, he said, and this cheered me up. My strong young boyfriends would eventually say that they saw our relationship as a weakness. I never knew what they meant. Their muscular legs would take off for runs or bike rides in the early morning. They were running away from me, my mother once said, because often they didn't return. For example, my young husband disappeared after going for a long, mindful ultra run. I like the look of that path, he said, and then I never saw him again. I knew there were mountain lions around, but they never found his bones. Thankfully, I heard from him a few years later. He wrote me a postcard from Jakarta to say that his knees, hips, and spine had finally given out. That's what unhappiness does, he wrote. By the time I was 27, I was tired of the young ones, their perfect bodies, and their deeply unsatisfied souls. When I first met the producer, I arrived at a hotel with my dog. I was still married, but my husband had been missing for a year. When the producer hugged me in the lobby of the hotel, I tried not to cry. You are tattered and shabby, he said, or maybe I imagined it. His skin was yellow and fragile to the touch. I like your face, I said. I like your dog, he said. We took the elevator up to his hotel room and he put on a Lucinda Williams song. He had an iPad that he didn't know how to use. He said the one thing he was confident about was the music app. Somehow I can always make it sing, he said. The song that plays in my head when I remember the producer is something about what happens when we talk. I felt it was corny the first time he played it for me, but now that he is gone, I miss the talks we had, how much he liked my dog, and how it felt as if he was calling to me from someplace close, but very far away. The last time I saw him, he perched on the sofa of our hotel room as if he was ready to fly. We are not the same age, he said. This seemed like an obvious fact, and one that might have been noted already. I'm not worried about it, I said, are you? I took his hand and it was cold. I wanted to say, please don't fret about nonsense. I yanked him off the sofa and right into my arms. We danced to Lucinda Williams. I felt sad that he had said it, and I was shivering a bit. He held me tight as a 20-year-old, but light as a paper doll, but felt light as a paper doll. So weightless, I could have carried him home in my arms. And the next story I'm reading is called Mom and the Otters, and it was published in Cleaver magazine. There was a time Dad scooted home with a bunch of supermarket flowers, handed Mom what he had to offer, flashed us his new beard, and we chanted, beard, 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 like we were a TV show about a family. And Mom, with her evaporated smile, said, fine, okay, let's head to the river and look for those otters. Took him by the wrist, and we sillies trailed along behind them, smiling to see the two of them walking in unison, watching her hair that no longer bounced or shone, wanting to see it the way Dad saw it, how it whispered around her ears, because he had been so long away, and he was back, and now she was coaxing him like an animal, saying, I deserve to see these damn otters if they really exist. And he smiled and kissed her hair, or maybe he smiled at us while we were kissing her hair, or maybe they were no longer walking next to each other. All I can remember from that time are the otters, how they finally swam over to greet her, how they let us know that they were not a dream. The next story is called Champion Pigeon, and it was published in JMWW magazine. Champion Pigeon. That time I took a train to Cornwall and sat on the beach thinking about nobody. That time I thought about finding a dog. That time I remembered nothing about the house in the city, the home my ex and I used to feel happy in. That time I decided that my life was about this moment and the next, one solo beach adventure at a time. That time I stood up and kicked off my flip-flops. That time I stood up and waved to invisible dolphins. That time and one other time after that, I missed nobody and nothing. The days were all about sandwiches, which ones to enjoy and which ones to improve on. One sandwich had floppy bread and stringy cheese. Another sandwich had too many seeds and not enough meat. My sandwich making skills were depleted. My life as an adventurer living alone in her kitchen felt unhappy. Some days, even the normal things felt like they needed forgiveness. Some days, I wanted to take a train ride to Cornwall and stop trying to make sandwiches, to eat at cafes with a traveler's smile. The man from Alaska texted me to say that he was experiencing boredom. I told him I was experiencing a similar thing. Is boredom an actual thing? He said. Yep, boredom is certainly a thing, I said. He asked me what I was cooking up for dinner. Shrimp ragu with yellow lentils and shiitake mushrooms, I lied. Gee, that sounds fantastic, he said. Damn right, and I'm someone lucky, I said. After that, I went into the kitchen to prepare myself a non-gooey sandwich. This time, I added fresh basil leaves for kicks, and I sprinkled pepper on healthy bread, hoping it would calm everything down. There was that time I heard an actual scream. It was no longer living in my head. I ran outside to see where it came from. I looked around the quiet cul-de-sac and saw nothing. The man across the way was outside feeding his pigeons. The pigeons were champions of living in cages. I wondered about striking up a conversation. How are those birds today, I might say. But then I remembered the echo of a scream, how easy it could be to wear a disguise, I thought. I stared at the man. Why did the people around here have such vapid smiles, yet nobody said a word? I decided that a simple encounter could easily become one big accident, and I went back inside my house. In his text, the man from Alaska said a visit would be like a winter gift. It's warmer there than here, at least, he said. I could hear a pigeon cooing outside the window while his positive thoughts chirped on, and my heartbeat grew regular. But later, I turned off my phone. Life became simple, walking outside and back in the house, looking for mail that had yet to arrive. I probably needed an office, I thought. I needed to get out of the house. A house can become an enemy. That time, I realized the man's visit would not cheer me up. That time, I felt only a tiny bit of shame for not encouraging him. How much I wanted to visit a relative, but one who no longer lived on this earth. On the beach in Cornwall, I decided that living alone was all about imagination. I thought about bringing home a puppy, all of the beautiful reasons to do it. I imagined the kind of friendship I might have with a gifted dog. But then I remembered how the best dogs weren't terribly smart. You don't want a smart one, a friend said. What you want is the kind who won't take over your life. I would research dumb dogs. As soon as I got home, I told myself. I put back on my flip-flops. They hurt my toe skin, but I was becoming tough. I would not think of the old house, the divorce. I walked to the parking lot, called a taxi. I would return to the Pleasant Hotel. I would grow old in my cage like a champion pigeon. And the last story I'm reading is called Freckles. And it's in my book, The First Law of Wholes, New and Selected Stories. It's forthcoming with Dejank Books at the end of the year. So here it is, Freckles. This one's a little bit shorter. Loretta, Trina, and Junie were real friends, and their backs were brown as beef jerky. None of them freckled as I did. Freckles on my face, my arms, my back, freckles on my lips, flecks of oil or butter or tomato sauce on my t-shirts. Everywhere I was spotted, defective. Only the dog's eyes followed me, as if I were banana frosting or a dog's version of it. Not until my 14th birthday did an electric switch turn on. Out came the family neck, the swan neck, as though it rose from my birthday cake where it had been sleeping. My eyes became purple, and boys called them picture windows. Well, not boys exactly. One girl did, Junie. It was still a compliment since Junie was a ballerina and valued physical beauty, especially the neck above all else. She knew what to look for, called herself a slut. She had an unnaturally gravelly voice, as though she'd been smoking for 40 years, as though she were half man, and when she laughed, it got worse. When I'm thirsty, I sound like a guy, she'd brag. One night, she slept over with her brown back in her dance bag. I became quiet around bedtime, couldn't think of funny stories. She started looking around my room all nosy for something to tease me with. When she crawled under my bed, I could see her belly button popping, an outie like a Cheerio. Is this your little teddy bear? She asked. She'd found Ted, my childhood pal, a rip bear with a babyish face beyond the plastic storage boxes. Holding Ted, giggling maniacally, Junie was trying to make him squeak like a dog toy, perfect and mean like a TV star she was. I wanted to ask her how to change my personality, how to become tan without ruining my skin forever, wrinkling up and dying of cancer. Anything felt possible, and I slid next to her so she wouldn't rip Teddy up, and I kissed her for a long time to save him. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Meg. Really great to have you.
Thanks.
Next we hear from David Swann, who was born a long time ago in a galaxy very, very far away, a few doors up the street from the novelist Wynette Winterson. Dave worked as a reporter on the local newspaper covering Accrington Stanley's football matches, and later moved to Amsterdam in the Netherlands, where he worked for a few years as a toilet cleaner in the legendary Paradiso nightclub. Whew. Since returning to the UK, he has worked as a teacher in prisons and universities. Dave's 2010 collection, The Privilege of Rain, about his residency in a high security prison, was shortlisted with Ted Hughes Award for new work in poetry. And last year, Dave's flash novella, Season of Bright Sorrow, won the Rubery Book of the Year prize. Dave likes to collaborate and is very fond of making largely pointless campfires on his vegetable plot. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you, Mark. Is that, am I unmuted?
You are.
Yes, okay, great, thank you. Yeah, and did I catch that correctly at the start, that you live overlooking Herman Melville's house?
Well, the mountain that inspired writing Moby Dick.
Wow, okay.
Well, his house is on the other side of the mountain than me, but I actually have direct view of Moby Dick's hump every morning.
Fantastic. Okay, well, my first piece is called Call Me, Ishmael. And it's kind of, as a teacher, I've kind of collected all of the mistakes that people have made over the years. And I tried very hard to compress them all in one story. So both of the flashes I'm going to read are set in schools, but the first one is from the point of view of a teacher invigilating an exam. So it's called Call Me, Ishmael. I clock him as soon as I enter the gymnasium for my shift as invigilator. He's sitting beneath the basketball hoop near a whiteboard that's been pushed against the varnished wooden wall bars. And he's stumped, I can tell straight away. It's the way he sits, a model of concentration, like my dog, when it's trying to work out why the stick I've thrown isn't in my hand anymore. Around him, his fellow students bow like swans to their exam papers. It's early, and the gymnasium feels as hollow as my stomach. I nod to the colleague I'm due to replace, aware of the racket I make in the aisle between the desks. It sounds like I'm wearing wooden galleons instead of shoes. With each step, another floorboard dies. The air is thick with fumes of gel and breath freshener. They flood back on me, the disasters of my own teenage campaigns. Those first moments of terror and self-consciousness, when you stare up at the railway station clock that someone had deemed suitable for an exam room. I remember the exam in which I had to stop myself from reaching out and stroking the long blonde hair of the girl in front of me. She'd recently washed her hair in apple shampoo, and I was supposed to be writing about Bismarck, but all I could picture was naked people in orchards. By some weird fluke, our janitors have mounted a similar clock here today in the gymnasium. Its face would cover the northern cliff of the Eiger. Each minute passes with a thwack of a plank. My colleague smiles up at me as I take his place. He's one of those invigilators who sits quietly at the front, finishing off batches of marking. Not me. I'm the invigilator I used to hate, the one who circumnavigates the exam room in heavy timber shoes. It's Michael I'm eager to see, the most befuddled boy I've ever taught, and one of the happiest. He's got something to teach me, I know that. So I set off on the prowl towards his desk, remembering the helicopter chase he wrote into his radio drama. When I advised him to develop the play's use of sound, he gave the hero a clicky elbow and smiled mildly when I suggested that this clicking may be something of a distraction during the love scene. As well as noisy skeletons, his hero was frequently engulfed or enveloped and suffered many shards and miasmas until eventually exciting the stage. There he is beneath the hoop on the brink of some new era. How kind he looks, how serene. Beside him on the whiteboard one of my colleagues in physical education has lynched the word relationships with a felt pen, then crossed it out and scribbled meet, pass, part. Now I'm standing directly above Michael, pretending to do my work. And he's dreamily writing about his favorite opening line in old literature. Call me Ishmael from Moby Dick, except he's inserted a comma before Ishmael's name. He's turning the page now into the final question, and I move on, keen not to disturb him. It's his face, though, the peace I find there. And I understand something at last. Maybe it's better to mess up the middle of your life than to be safe on its edges. During my final creaking circuit of the gymnasium, I find him smiling over the line it's taken him an hour to carve, as studious as a stonemason. Allergy in a country churchyard. There, the title done, only the essay remaining. Pupil, 15 minutes left. When I look back down the gym, he's completing his inscription, filling in the white bits with his diligent pen until every part of the error is perfect. So that's that one. The next one is from the point of view of a love-struck pupil in school. For those too young to remember, David Cassidy was a pop star who all the girls in my school fancied a lot more than they fancied us. And there was a magazine called Jackie, in which he was the cover star most weeks. So this is called The First Death of David Cassidy. It had taken them years to learn how, but suddenly the girls were floating. At first, they rose only inches from their stools in the chemistry lab. But I was so weighed down with underwater telegraph cables that I missed the moment when the girls escaped gravity. Then Sandra drifted over my desk, as serene as a summer cloud. Her eyes were shut, their lashes fluttering, as if she'd entered a blissful dream. Sandra was the girl I'd worn the weights for, in return for being allowed to stare at the back of her head during double chemistry. Other boys were carting around buckets of industrial rubble for her, or wearing deep-sea diving boots. Brian Douglas had glued shot puts to his hands, and the class genius, Ronnie Clayton, was totally encased in slow-drying cement. Now other girls were rising up into the air too in states of quiet rapture, and boys all around me struggling to reach them. But some had been tied to tractors, and others welded onto anvils by their ears, and it was no use. Brian Douglas was the first to work out the rules. The girls started to float when they imagined themselves doing things with boys. And this ought to be encouraging, because we were boys too. But the class genius, Ronnie Douglas, sighed. Unfortunately, we weren't the boys the girls imagined doing things with, he told Brian, speaking through a slot in the slow-drying cement that had encased him. Those are boys in different places, he said, and we wouldn't be those boys even if we went to those other places, Brian. Next, Ronnie spoke through the slot in the slow-drying cement to explain that he had used his genius to decipher the code words that freed girls from gravity. These code words included the words Cassidy and Osman, although the later needed careful precision or it would summon the wrong kind of levitation, a little jerky and uneven. To get the perfect glide going, the girls used a book of spells called Jackie and needed the right condition, including spots of rain on the classroom windows and Bunsen burners quietly bubbling, while a teacher droned on somewhere about the acidic content of podzol soils. Then, slowly, up they go, just as Brian predicted, the whole lot of them, as airy and light as balloons, until Mr. Podzol had to summon the janitor to poke the girls down from the ceiling with a stick. The janitor was a blunt Lancastrian named Mr. Gridlock, whose main duty was to feed the school furnace, apparently with badly behaved first formers and uneaten tapioca pudding. On that infamous day, it wasn't the janitor's stick that felled the girls, and it wasn't our burdens, which we were forever jangling and rattling to make the girls finally notice our sufferings. No, the force that lowered the lasses from their reverie entered the classroom invisibly on a draft of air, as rumours always do. What started as an ominous whisper soon became louder and more urgent, until the gossip had everyone in its spiralling grip. And finally, our no-nonsense janitor, Mr. Gridlock, returned to utter the dreaded words. "Is there any truth in this rumour?" he said. "Has the pop star David Cassidy really been killed in a car crash?" The girls plummeted from the ceiling as one organism and knocked us off our stools and scorched themselves on the burners, and they dislodged the acid bath's lid so that some fell directly into the acid and others rolled screaming through flames of potassium. Then Sandra crashed through the lab's enormous plate glass window and vanished into the drizzly wastes beyond. Feverishly, I unwound the vast underwater telegraph cable and crawled out from beneath piles of crushed bodies and beat a path through the flames. Outside, I saw Sandra tumbling down the hill as crazy as a spinning top. She was on fire and screaming, and the cliffs at the foot of the hill were very close. "Sandra," I called, "I've removed the cable I wore for you. It was a big cable, actually the one that used to span the seabed between Cornwall and Spain, but I managed it quite easily, and all with the intention of saving you, Sandra. Sandra, hold on, Sandra." It was a bit of a mouthful, but I hoped nobody had noticed amidst all the chaos, and I tore down the hill, passing the armada of ambulances and fire engines that were now rushing the other way. At the cliff edge, I gazed over the waters, raging in a tempest. "They've whipped it up with their grief," said an old bloke going by with his Labrador. "Whatever you're searching for, she's likely to have become the victim of what is known by sociologists as a thought panic." Undaunted, I took off my shirt and prepared to dive into the maelstrom. It was exactly as I'd always secretly planned it, a colossal disaster, mainly affecting girls that I fancied. "Sandra," I called as I dived in. "I'm coming, Sandra." She was about to drown when I reached her and quickly lashed together a raft from test tubes I'd managed to collect before fleeing from the chemistry lab. "You came," she said, slowly losing consciousness. "Yes," I said, "I'm here." The raft was sinking now, but I put my hand in hers and felt us slowly rise until we were free of those deadly waves and floating together through Sandra's dream. When we drifted over the burning school, I pointed down, but Sandra's eyelashes were fluttering, and she said, "Yes, it's sad about almost everyone else dying, but the main thing is, we're together now, David." My name was Keith, but I didn't say anything about that, not even when she drowsily described the stickers she'd collected of me and how many of my vinyl records she owned. Gently, I hushed her and closed her hand around mine, and we climbed steadily into new heights. I was free of my burdens now, and the whole sky lay in front of us. And if she thought I was somebody else, well, we could discuss that later when we were both less stressed. Thanks, everyone.
That was something else.
Yeah. Thank you, David. Next we hear from Celia Bland, whose third collection of poetry, Cherokee Roadkill, was published in 2018 with visual artist Kyoko Miyabe. She co-edited Jane Cooper, A Radiance of Attention, for the University of Michigan Press in 2019. Celia has received the Rainer's Prize, an Academy of American Poetry Prize, and was a resident at the Edward Albee Foundation and Blue Mountain Center. Celia is an administrator at Bard College, where she taught until recently in the written arts. Welcome, Celia.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Jeff. Thank you all for being out there this afternoon. It's an honor to read with Jeff Friedman and Meg and David tonight. I'm beaming in from Virginia's Eastern Shore, and I hope to read some poems that were inspired by some years I spent teaching overseas. I was going to begin with a piece set at the University of Mandalay in Myanmar, or Burma, as the US still calls it. Mandalay, those of you may know, if you haven't been there yourselves, you may know it from George Orwell's first novel, Burmese Days, which is where the protagonist is set. He's a military policeman, as Orwell was in the 1920s. So when I was there in 2020, the university had been shuttered for many years after the students had risen up against the military junta, but they'd recently reopened it. It was a beautiful place, Beaux-Arts, marble buildings in disrepair, overgrown with weeds. There were wild dogs roaming in packs. So I have a series of poems about the short time I spent in Mandalay, but I'll just read two. The first one takes place in what must have been a conservatory at some time, where I was asked to observe a French class. So there's a poem about that experience. And then there's this one about a pedestal near where I was sitting in that French classroom that displayed this huge, very, very dusty tortoise shell. Star tortoise, says a yellowing note card, lays 6 eggs per clutch. I peer through the hole where head would peek where the shell inhabited. Having lifted a box turtle from a slow and grassy trajectory, I know the turtle's wizened body does more than camp within its shell, just as soul resists redaction from flesh and bone. And yet flesh abandons bone. I can only describe what I myself saw or heard. Star tortoise, said a yellowing note card, lays 6 eggs per clutch. I peer into the hole where a head once peeked. Why are intricately ridged skeletons so rarely included in displays of these mosaic scudded helmets? How are we so easily excised from our beautiful shells? The next day, I fell ill, and when I again entered my classroom, stretched upon the desk was a man. Like others who are rarely ill, I can imagine death in any upset. If my insides fly outside, I cry for a cold cloth, for the inexorable pit of sleep. The man was sleeping, I thought. He was probably squatting in abandoned rooms around the campus and found my door unlocked and lay himself down on a desk on a pad of newsprint brought from the States. Standing wan and weak at my classroom door, I look at the man as he lay with knees crooked to his chest, feet calloused, and black flip-flops crossed at the ankle. There were 3 boxes of magic markers stacked behind his back, and there was the newsprint beneath. I move close to collect my property and see that the man's skin is taut over the hard hollows of his skull, seemingly transparent, as if I might see through his temple and in. I saw that he was dead. To the head teacher, I ceded all the requisite calls. Okay, I'm jumping around here geographically, but the next destination is Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam, and it's set in the market there, which is called Binh Thao. And I'll just mention that I say the word dong, which is the currency in Vietnam. Sorry. The taxidermied bat. In the Binh Thong covered market, I will myself towards life, buying currants, apricots, slabs of chops and chicken thighs, lengths of a picked silk for a sorry, the indescribable green of grasshoppers' backs. But I buy a fire bat framed 6 by 6 in a shadow box. The fire bat's wings are extended hands inside leathery flanges. They are pinned to the frame by tiny thumbs, black slippered feet pinned. Fish roe in tubs, wooden buttons, basketball sneakers, vats of kumis, pine for my dong in a din among stalls, flapping, perambulating, sipping among echoes of coins clinking into a palm as I pay a man for a furred cylinder, hollowed out, framed 6 by 6 in shadow. And this one is set in the Mekong Delta, where I had a little excursion. The naturalist explains the Vietnam War to us, ringing a chime of dangling shrapnel. Monkeys, skinny jointed limbs, unjointed tails, chatter, moving rapidly above us in the canopy. Put away your sunglasses, keys, snow bottles. Let nothing attract their eyes. Monkeys war for attention, food, and souvenirs. Let nothing dangle. The naturalist explains the monkey war to us. Here is the new leader, his coup against a female huddling, half scalped. She is ostracized. Her wound is a pomegranate, pink and seedy. She hangs now with the adolescent monkeys for safety, although, says the naturalist, one will most certainly kill her, counting coup. And now one from St. Petersburg in Russia. Kind of a whirlwind. This one was inspired by, or let's just say it is set at a plaza at one of those beautiful onion dome cathedrals in St. Petersburg that was built on the site of an assassination of Tsar Alexander II in the 1880s. It's called The Hat. I find in a market stall in a windy square, under the turban domes of the Church of the Savior on spilled blood. Let me say that again. I find in a market stall in a windy square, under the turban domes of the Church of the Savior on spilled blood, a fox fur hat. It is a cold morning and a sharp wind. A pale sun pees out. The fox fur hat is a hard decision at a tourist venue, ragged with plastic parachutes of dog poop and pop bottles iced into the ruffles of the Neva, frigid as a trigger squeeze. I crown myself in a warmth that outlasts fox, in a red like my own head before it altered with care. The color that persists in cowlicks, puffing from the neck napes of my 3 kids born into waters far from the spilling Neva, beneath a memorial on spilled blood. And just one more that's just local, more or less. from that's set in North Carolina, where I grew up. It's called The Morning After. He told us he tucked gold pieces in the cedar closet's coat pockets. He bought 3 quarter horses, a wire hen coop, and installed hogs in their wallow. A Paisley peacock strutted where he would, cawing a honking Chrysler. There's plenty to see me out, my grandfather said. But when that sad day broke, the peacock choked on a fist of June apple. No gold surfaced as we wallowed in bills. The Cadillac went to neighbors, the animals to the knacker, and I was left to pluck from the dirt 3 paisley-eyed feathers, elegantly fringed. My mother and I moved into the horse barn. There was a sink. Sleep, distilled in throaty coos from mourning doves, flocked in the rafters above our foam mattress. A satisfied despair I could recognize in the "Did you find everything you need?" mouthed by clerks at Food Lion. And to think that I have actually said, I am painting my dining room peacock blue. A conversational sally, a precarious scratch of quill against my cheeks and the freckled backs of my hands. Thank you.
Yay. So smooth.
Thank you, Celia. And now we're delighted to hear from Jeff Friedman, who's the author of 10 collections of poetry and prose, including Ashes in Paradise, just out from Mad Hat Press, The House of Gran Padano from Pelicanesis in April 2022, co-written with Meg Pokrass, and The Marksman from Carnegie Mellon U Press, and Floating Tales previously with Mad Hat 2. Fred's poems, many tales and translations have appeared in many journals, anthologies, including American Poetry Review, Poetry, New England Poetry, commentaries from 80 American poets on their prose poetry, Flash Fiction, Funny, Dreaming Awake, New Contemporary Prose Poetry from the United States, Australia, and United Kingdom, which also came out with Mad Hat Press, The New Republic, and he's been published in the Best Microfiction 2021, 2022, 2023. And Jeff received an NEA Literature Translation Fellowship and numerous other awards and prizes. He lives in West Lebanon, New Hampshire, with the artist Colleen Randall and their dog Ruby. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you, Mark, for that introduction, and thank you, Jeffrey, for handling all this. It's a pleasure to read with Celia and Meg and David, and great readings ahead of me. I loved all of them. Also, it's a pleasure to be here with Mark, who has published a couple of my books, and I've been in some of his anthologies. So I'm going to start with a piece that appeared as both. Sometimes I work between the prose poem and the microstory. I feel there's a little territory in between, but this piece, My Mother's Dress Shop, appeared both in Fortnightly Review, I think, as a prose poem, and then also in the Best Microfiction. My mother had a little dress shop in St. Louis, Missouri, in Midtown St. Louis, that she used to say she sold sexy clothing. And I worked down there occasionally as a teenager, helping to unload trucks and to break down the boxes. And the shop got robbed practically every week. So, but anyway, it's called My Mother's Dress Shop. Break down the boxes that held the clothing and stuff them into the dumpster in the alley behind the shop. Break down the racks that held the sexy dresses, the leather coats, the French lingerie, until they are just rods and wheels lying in a corner. Fold up the clothing neatly. Break down the counter, the shelves, and the cash register, empty of cash. Break down the shadows that no longer hold voices. Break down the light that drops through the window like a message until there's just a scrap of light. Break down the dust that clings to the walls and counters your mother attacks with a cloth and Windex. Break down the mannequins until they are disconnected limbs, head, and torso. Now there is only the memory of a memory, the striped cat leaping on the counter, its tail ticking back and forth, the nurses in white uniforms peeking in the windows of air to spot a skirt or blouse on sale, your mother's voice coming back to you like the smells of a fresh cinnamon sweet roll and steaming black coffee, and the blaze of sun that makes it impossible to see. The next piece I'm going to read comes out of Ashes in Paradise, next couple of pieces. I'm going to read a couple of the comic pieces. And you can see this is beautifully designed by none other than Mark Vincennes. So I thought I'd show it off a little. I haven't been working autobiographically much lately, but, and this may not be, but Somebody's Got My Hair seems to have something to do with my life. So I'm going to read this poem called Somebody's Got My Hair. And the title it leads into the first line. So, somebody's got my hair, I said to my lover, who stood in front of the mirror in a long white t-shirt, brushing out her thick black hair. The silver brush glinted. I touched my head again and again, nothing but craggy dome and small patches of stubble over my ears. I felt a little tired and weak without my hair. How could I go out into the street as a bald man? When's the last time you had your hair, she asked. Try to remember where you were. I could imagine myself with thick, wavy brown hair, but I couldn't picture myself in a particular place. She put the brush down and came back to the bed, pressing her palm against my forehead. No fever, no hair. Did you lose it somewhere? No, it's hair. Goes with me everywhere. She removed her hand. Is it possible that someone from the office stole it while you were napping? She looked deeply into my eyes, probing for the truth. I don't work in an office, I said. I don't work at all. Did you possibly sell it to someone? I shook my head. She knew I would never sell my hair. Was she trying to help or ridicule me? She got up and began searching through my drawers and the closets. No sign of your hair anywhere, not even a single strand. I rose from bed and got dressed. She kissed me on the top of my head. I fell in love with a bald man, not a man who has brown wavy hair. I smiled and kissed her back, though I knew she was in love with someone else. Next piece I'm going to read is a piece called Shape. And I think as we get to a certain age, we're all dealing with shape. Shape. You've lost your shape, my lover says. As she cleans the surface of the coffee table, she clicks her tongue and shakes her head without even looking at me. I rise from the couch. How so? I ask. She steps back, taking me in with her eyes. You're shapeless, she says. No other way to say it. That's impossible. Everybody, everything has a shape. What am I? An egg? A crooked trapezoid? A square with fuzzy edges? No, you're more like a dollop of whipped cream, or a blob of jam, or foam and latte, though not so tasty. Can we stick to geometry? I ask. This seems more about chaos, she says, folding her dust rag. Look in the mirror. I walk into the bathroom. She's right. I'm shapeless. I can't find my belly or face. How am I even able to wear clothes? I ask. Loosely, she says. What causes someone to lose his shape, I wonder? Too much self-preoccupation or too little? I should have eaten better, taken care of myself. My lover puts her arm around me, and her arm appears to float in fog. I'm sure there's an exercise you can do to regain shape, or some words you can chant, or a yoga pose that might be perfect for just this condition. Maybe there's a doctor who specializes in treating this, I reply. She smiles, and even if there isn't, but something is happening in the bathroom light. Out of my shapelessness, a new shape is emerging, even if it is still in flux, even if we can't quite see it. And let's see, page 63. This one is called Father and Son Singing. You don't sing much, do you, son? My father asks, sitting in his chair in the living room. He sings broken phrases, disconnected words, syllables that could be mantras the way he bends and stretches them. He sings melodies full of coins and fountains of cash. He sings a son who embraces his absence with real love. Now, sitting in my chair, I sing too. Bridges falling into holes, ties dangling from branches, monogrammed handkerchiefs sailing like kites. I sing the belly of my father, hands that rip cardboard boxes in two, his stubbled cheeks and chin, pillowcases stuffed with bills. I sing glossy wingtips sparking on the pavement, suits made of dust, the melody in the covered mirrors. His song ends with a sigh, mine with a gurgle. Neither of us can carry a tune. And a couple of, so this book was written during the awful Trump administration and the pandemic. So it's really informed by a lot of that. So there are a number of pieces that are kind of just responding to what's going on or what's been going on out there. This is one of them. This piece is called Boy with Holes. Page 9. The Boy with Holes. The officers who shot the boy repeatedly watched him fall face first, his arms and legs jerking until all movement ceased. They kept their distance, holstering their weapons, sure that it was all over. But the boy rose, his sweet face dirt-stained. He walked slowly toward the officers. Light poked through the holes in his body. The ground was wet with blood. They stepped back and took out their weapons again. I've never seen anything like this before, one officer said. The other agreed. Though they told him to stop and get down on his knees, the boy kept walking until he stood so close he touched one officer on the arm. Like a breath raising the skin, his hand felt weightless. The officer cocked his gun and held it to the boy's head. Crows gathered around them. The trees rustled. The red sun flared so intensely they had to squint to see his shape. And then the boy vanished. Now all they could see were the holes. And it's hard to miss the kind of distortion of reality and the attack on it. So this piece is again a response to something going on called The Last Truth. One truth was shot while it sat in a cafe, sipping an Americano and writing its memoir. Another truth rose up on a stage and protested the swarm of lies that had descended on the town, clinging to heads and faces or flying down throats. The mob rushed the stage, pummeling this truth until it fell beneath them. They kicked and stomped it to death. Another truth was tortured until it confessed that it was a lie, and then the spirit left its body, and only emptiness resided inside it. Many truths were burned in the public square as they screamed, "I'm telling the truth." We collected their ashes and bone in an urn and tried to bring them back to life with spells and chants. But our words had lost their belief in the power to summon. And the last truth, hiding for months in abandoned buildings, escaped into the forest. When it returned years later, no one recognized it or believed what it was saying. And I'll finish on a lighter poem about homelands and nations, even though that's not a light subject in actuality, but this is called Homeland. You should visit Hungary, my sister said. It's our homeland. How could it be my homeland, I asked. I've never been there. Everyone there has Dad's brown eyes and his rock of a chin. Everyone looks like him and like us. I peered into my sister's face and saw my father's face, and then my own. I remembered how my father combed wildroot into his black, curly hair, huffing so forcefully he fogged up the bathroom mirror, how he whipped the comb away, flinging oily drops on the tile floor, how at dinner he inhaled the hot breath of Hungarian stew as though it were the air rising from the earth of his homeland. A country of our people, I thought, everyone looking like everyone else, everyone looking like us, Every face, a mirror of every face. Scary, I said. I'm not going. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Jeff. That was awesome, huh?
Thank
So
you
I
so
guess
much.
that's a pretty punchy stuff, huh?
Definitely, definitely. And we'd like to thank again Meg Pokrass, Dave Swann, Celia Bland, and Jeff Friedman for this great exposure to flash and prose poetry. Also, you know, continuing this tradition of prose poetry that began probably 100 years ago in series. Yeah, it's fantastic. So yeah, are you ready to take over with
Yeah.
the open mic, Jeff?
Yeah, let's get it on. What a way to go. It's happy Saturday. Let's
All
start
right.
off with, we have a big list today, so if you could please keep it tight. Let's start off with the first person to ask here, Francine Witt.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute. Hi, Jeff. It's nice to see you here as host. I didn't know that happened, but that's a great choice.
Thanks.
So, snout face. Not now, but soon I will be leaving Busby. Busby, whose eyes are dark marbles, whose eyes don't meet mine anymore. His face is long like a bear face, his mouth wide and gaping, like he could swallow a salmon whole. Soon it will be barren season, dry and famine, like a town up north where starving polar bears invade, just clomping down Main Street, nosing into garbage cans, and the people adjust by leaving their car doors open for pedestrians to dive into. No one blames a bear for being a bear, and so I can't blame Busby for being Busby. I knew he was snort and prowl when I met him. Now I leave my heart open so he can dive in any time. Like when he's lost another job because his boss was a dick or some other Busby logic. But soon, not now, not today. I will get tired of it all, get tired of being flipped and flapped in Busby's snout mouth. I will restart myself in forage mode, adapt myself for a long, hungry winter, curl up in the hand of my own hungry heart. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Francine. So lovely. What a day. All right. And next up, let's have May Kurawa. And a regular, right? May, are you still here? Where's May?
Yes, I am. This is
Okay.
my second time here, so I'm so happy to have found this group. It's wonderful. Okay, I'm originally from Hawaii, and my parents immigrated from Japan to work on the sugarcane plantations over 100 years ago. Small deaths. Mom came into the house through the back door, not the front, into the kitchen where we sat doing homework after Dad's dinner of fried spam and rice. Tears and loose hairs streaked across her face, and began soaping and scrubbing her hands at the sink, the hot water tap running hard. I ran over the cat, she said. Why'd you do that for? Said my brother. Do you think I was aiming for him? She said. You killed Rocky? I said. And she turned off the water and began sobbing into the kitchen towel. Dad asked her what she expected. She shouldn't feed the damn cat every night when she came home from the restaurant kitchen, where she worked full time, bussing tables and scrubbing pots, saving for our college tuitions. It gave her a tired joy to see the cat come to greet her opened car door with uplifted tail curved into a question, bits of beef stroganoff or curls of salmon skin, unwrapped and placed on the ground. He arched his back under her hand and buried his head in fulfillment, the one moment something good always happened. She and the cat could create a little pool of happiness together in the dark. He came running out onto the road, Mom said. He recognized your car's engine. Dad said. Please, said Mom. Please take care of the body. I can't touch it, she said. Not again. Dad lowered his paper and looked at her. This woman who had birthed 6 children, who had endured World War II's martial law for 3 years and cared for his bedridden mother until her final stroke. More than 6 decades later, both my parents long dead, I remember the burlap bag with its small burden, the shovel, the sound of earth moving in the night, and Dad burying Rocky in our banana patch, the sweetest fruit on the plantation.
Sweet, May, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And next, a real stalwart of the gang here, DeWitt Henry.
Hi, this is called Corpus. A life's work left behind remains preserved, even if in progress, to be considered as a whole, usually already public, but sometimes not. Legacy, canon, oeuvre, as brief as single book or daunting as many, not to be confused with papers or archives. Corporal punishment, i.e., damaging the corpus, physically or critically. Book burning, censorship, cultural agendas, defamation. Sir Philip Sidney defined poetry as that which we will not willingly let die. He incorporates humanity despite our fears of evolution, devolution, and Tennyson's anxiety of language. Corpse, carcass, or cadaver, we call the dead ones. Ashes if cremains, or mummy if preserved, or cryogenics frozen sleeper, or zombie is still walking. Aesthetes fight the tyrannies of hunger, pain, and lust. Hedonists and epicures glorify life's touch, seizing their days while addicts crave chemical states. Carnival or Lent, feast or fast or feast, corpulent or lean, celibate or celebrate, bonfire of the vanities. Poet Thomas Lux, suffering from cancer, wrote a parting litany like goodnight moons. Let us praise the joy bringer for these 7 things. 1, right lung. 2, left lung. 3, heart. 4, left brain. 5, right brain. 6, tongue. 7, the body to put them in. Thank you, joy bringer. Our body's worth about $1 for elements. However, $500,000 for organs freshly harvested. Donated to science, it serves to keep on giving. For the familiar allegory of body politic, see Coriolanus. All the body's members rebelled against the belly. Heroes show battle scars, would-be saints mortify flesh, self-lash, wear hair shirts, and sleep in coffins. Others dream of heaven, where each soul is dressed again in youthful best. or of reincarnation, up and down great beings' chain. My body to you, says both lover and writer, person and works, embodied or dis, fleshed out and transmogrified.
Oh man, transmogrify us. Thank you, DeWitt. I love Sir Philip Sidney, man. I would invite him to my dinner party with 2 other people from the New York Times. So let's move right along. Thank you, DeWitt. We have so many people. Let's see. Coming up, we have Joan Anglin, but next we're going to have John Wessick. John.
Okay, here is a poem from a Jeff Friedman workshop. After school let out. After school let out, I drove my 1963 Pontiac to Nikki's house. After school let out, I abandoned my textbooks on its blue upholstery. After school let out, I brushed aside her red hair to kiss the freckled skin of her neck. After school let out, she took my hand and left her wire-haired terrier on the plastic-covered couch. After school let out, our naked bodies touched skins in her bedroom. After school let out, her dog whined outside the bedroom door. After school let out, we watched the clock so I could leave before her mom got home. And it's all your fault, Jeff.
Oh my God.
All right, too much, Jeff. Well, shame on you. All right, thank you, John and Jeff. All right, let's have jump in now to have Joan next, and then we've got a couple coming up with Karen Leslie. We got Cindy and Bob, we got Period Springs, and Lee is still here. So did I say Joan was next? Joan Anglin, please.
All right. Hello, everybody. This is just a quick poem about writing in general, okay, that I wrote a long time ago. Okay. Writing Lost in Quickness is the name. Oh, that I could just once write the words my mind alone can hear. Sweet expression of my soul, forever to be lost to the lack of quickness in the hand. Must all beautiful things be left unsaid, unwritten, and forgot, when one knows we are all poets, just trying to collect our thoughts? The end.
All right, here we go. Thank you very much, John. That was nice to hear. Let's pop in here. Period Springs Press. Are you here now? Did I mention that one? Here we go.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Wow, I can.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, good. Make sure. Hey, it's Kurt Lovelace. Actually, I couldn't change the name when I got into the system, so yeah, I am with Period Springs, but I also could not change it to my own name. This is called Edelweiss. Starts with a quote. I imagine one of the reasons people cling to their hate so stubbornly is because they sense once hate is gone, they'll be forced to deal with their pain. James Baldwin. Edelweiss. When I was 11, Mom and I, ostensibly, we spent a stint in Austria to get my tonsils and adenoids exorcised at the Catholic hospital in Innsbruck. Passing nuns laughed in the post-op at children they suffered to clean up after their anesthesia vomit. Ice-cold needles of penicillin plunged into my buttocks daily to ward off infection I'd caught from the cleaned white bleach linen appearance of the hospital's diseases. I ran in the flowered courtyard's chilly air. My throat still bled, bits raw and red. I coughed crimson the Edelweiss into red swastikas. History, like Hitler, has a very long tail where you feel free, but know you are knotted into the earth.
Oh man, what a long tail that is. Thank you. And it's Kurt. Okay, all right. Let's get Leslie Prosterman. What you got for us today?
Hey, it is great to hear everybody, and the features were fantastic. I've got an excerpt from a much longer prose poem, and it's called In Search of the Cherry Trees of the Botanical Gardens in Brooklyn. And the two lines that aren't mine are from Whitman. And it begins from Whitman: "You must habit yourself to the dazzle of the light and of every moment of your life." So we took the Q train, which dumped us into a part of Brooklyn that had no sign on it saying to the Botanical Gardens. But we did see a mass of feathery green which said park to both of us. And off to the left, it was in fact park because we walked into it and there were leaves and there was grass and waves of bloomy trees. And we kept on walking and we marveled as we searched for cherry trees, but instead kept encountering varying varieties of magnolia, which, as everyone knows, are not the same thing, even though frothy and towering in their own right, and plenty of Wordsworthian daffodils, without which there would be no Wordsworth. And we spoke of this and began to realize we would not reach those cherry trees anytime soon without some help. So I said, look, there's a woman wearing short sleeves and two dogs on leashes, and therefore she must be local and will tell us the way to the cherry trees if we ask. So I said, excuse me, excuse me. And she said, excuse me, which confused me. And then she said, excuse me, I know you. By then she was laughing. Just like in all the best stories, out of the woods had appeared a magical guide who spoke somewhat gnomically, or certainly unexpectedly. But in fact, it was Jen Bervin, and she did know me, but still, it was pretty strange because we don't live near Prospect Park. We both live in Manhattan, though Caroline's in-laws do live in Brooklyn Heights, but we didn't expect to run into anyone, especially someone we had accosted, just because she was wearing short sleeves. And the world got smaller and larger all at once. The hillside became a hillock of poets, one saying to the others, "You will never find your way by yourself. I will show you." And we pursued the back of her with Buttons and the other dog, occasionally winding their leashes around my ankles, and Caroline trying to tell the parallel narrative of the shaman, and Jen bounding every step further into the distance, while we caught up and fell back, but acquiring a little more knowledge about the park, or Jen's life in Brooklyn, or where we might have been, quite the Virgilian moment, and challenged by her speed to talk faster and laugh louder as the afternoon unspooled. As we quick-stepped, the sun lit through horizontal frillies, white and pink masses of fruit trees, some of which may have been cherries, but were not in the botanical gardens, and were not what we were looking for because we flashed by them at warp speed and chased on. And we remembered out of leaves of grass to be a bold swimmer, to jump off in the midst of the sea and rise again and nod to me and shout and laughingly dash with your hair. And we laughingly dashed and jumped off into the green along the Brooklyn poet, there is more than one, and ran and shouted and raced our words faster. And suddenly we reached the gates and went around and then through and looked for the cherry trees, Jen having disappeared in another direction.
Thank you, honey, delicious.
Right, all right.
That's a great comment to it. Jen having disappeared in another direction, and we peered and searched for the cherry trees, and then it turned out they were directly above and around us, and the sky was a Chinese lacquer blue, a perfect foil for the Japanese paper tissue, plum white and pink, alight with sun on gnarly branches. We lay back as time pooled, and then it was colder and time to go home.
Oh, beautiful, Leslie. Thank you. Caught up and fell back. Say hi to Jen. Jen, sorry. All right. Moving along, we've got 4 more readers. Lee, how do you say your last name? Desrosier?
It's de Rogers unless you're French, in which case it's de Rosier.
Try too hard. Okay, Lee.
Thank you. Hold on, just gotta get the poem up. There we go. Oh no, that's not it. Oh my gosh. Hold the wrong. Okay. This is part of a longer series. It's very long at the moment. There's about 30 parts to it so far. My gender smells like the first thin tornado of smoke from a stick, spun between palms, over dried moss for kindling. On a walk, my gender is a patch of grass I use to wipe off the mud. Kind of lovely, kind of messy, but necessary. My gender is a whiff of spring air after a long winter, and also the sound of the first robin in the yard who tries to make a nest of dry moss on top of my black mailbox. My gender is a far-off campfire, smells piney, but the smoke comes in the window and makes us cough, and we see on the news it's a forest fire on the mountain. My gender argues with me about closing the window when the evening skunk crosses the driveway because we should appreciate nature. My gender is the smoke and the grit and the grass. They are the pine and the skunk and the nesting robin. I take off the moss and they put it back.
All right. Oh, take off the moss. All right, let's have now Karen Newberg. Karen, what you got today?
Hi, Jeff. Thanks. Good to see you and wonderful reading, everyone, and all the features. Really great. I'm reading a short prose poem. It's called Changing Coats. You might begin with yourself wearing a red parka and playing in heaps of snow and immediately transfer into the schoolyard where you've undone your overcoat's top buttons despite the brisk wind. Here is where you don't know something about to happen never does, at least not in memory, but how you had wished for it at the time, held your breath, anticipation making you someone else while it lasted.
Oh, how poignant right there. Boom. While it lasted. Thank you, Karen. And now we're getting into our closeout, our grand duo here, the one and only Cindy Hockman.
One and only. I'm going to read a short, silly, surrealistic poem that happens to be in my latest chapbook, telling you everything. But it tells you nothing because it's not even comprehensible. It's called After a Groundswell, and it is a prose poem. After a groundswell of a week, vigilant ray moles and holes, clumping around with bloody boots and sunken folds. I want to clear my mind and think only of gnomes. Let's trade skins. You be dimpled and I'll be freckled, and we'll both be speckled, or puckered, or rumpled, though I'd rather be coupled. Let's have social intercourse with our funny mouths. And I made funny mouths one word, so that's how it appears in the book, which you all should go to Amazon and buy. Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll do that. I want to go to Amazon to deliver that too. Okay, Cindy, thank you. And let's end up with Bob Heeman. Bob, Dr.
Hi,
Information.
Jeff. Okay, this is a very short information piece. Information. The running gag included a rocking horse and a telephone book and a plate of linguine. The witness was no more than an owl that had been stuffed a long time before. Each word spoken left a trail the others were required to follow. Thank you.
Bob, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. Thank you, Celia. Thank you.
Thanks.
All your open mic is fantastic. And of course, thank you to Meg Pokrass, Jeff Friedman, Celia Bland, and Dave Swann for joining us tonight in this fantastic feature on prose poetry, flash fiction, etc. And just to let you know, coming up very soon, in fact, next week, we have Maxine Chernoff, Paul Hoover, Leah Graham, Randy Prunty, Donna de la Pierre, Keith Donald Jr., and Francis Wong. And there will be giveaways of Maxine Chernoff's new book, The New and Selected Poems, Light and Clay. So join us there. And yeah, wonderful reading tonight. I'm gonna just sort of close off with something from the view of a bird, and this is called A Starling's Defense. Ambience and verse on the surface of the clouds. A mouthful of moist elan in a pocket full of wind. A talon of fuzzy green caterpillars. Tall moonflowers with immobile heads. I above as I below, following the draft of the shadow, of the slim, slow spiral of the carrion wasp, gorging on yesterday's dead. Good night, everybody. Thanks for this wonderful show.
Next
See
week.
you next Saturday, yeah?
Go, go,
Lots of
go.
love and poetry, yeah?